Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Today's story unfolds over years, not days. It begins with good intentions, responsible planning, and a family that believed everything was under control. But distance, convenience, and unchecked authority created the perfect environment for greed to grow unnoticed. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. My aunt tried to steal my $10,000. She ended up losing her house and owing the IRS $420,000. This all happened about 5 years back. My grandma was getting on in years, late 80s, pushing early 90s. She had one clear, unwavering wish: to not die in a senior home. Thankfully, that was easily within reach because my grandpa, a frugal and foresighted man, had sold off some assets way back when, a parcel of land his family had owned for generations, and invested the money wisely. He just let it ride for over 30 years, never touching the principal, living solely on his pension. It was his quiet nest egg for their future, and ultimately for her care. When my grandpa passed away about a decade before all this, the structure he'd set up kicked into gear. My grandma, while still sharp, appointed my dad along with my crappy Aunt Karen and my Uncle Fred as the trustees of the trust. They were to be trusted advisors, managing the assets, and most importantly, overseeing her care and well-being for the foreseeable future. In the beginning, it seemed to work. My dad, let's call him Willie, lived close by and handled the day-to-day, checking in, managing small repairs, making sure she had what she needed. Then life shifted. My dad got a promotion that required a move a few hours away. He couldn't handle the daily upkeep of the trustee role anymore. That's when my Aunt Karen stepped in. She lived only 2 miles from Grandma, and she assured everyone that she, along with my Uncle Fred, who lived out in Arizona, could take over seamlessly. "Don't you worry about a thing, Willie," she'd said. "We've got it covered. Mom will be just fine." And for a while, it seemed she was. The cracks started to show during my dad's visits. He'd drive down every few weeks and notice little things that didn't sit right. The mailbox would be overflowing, the circulars and bills poking out like a white flag of neglect. In the winter, the driveway would be buried under a foot of snow, untouched by a plow. One time, he found her sitting in the dark, silent living room. "The TV's been out for weeks," she'd said with a shrug. The newspaper had also stopped coming. Dad figured the subscriptions had just lapsed amidst bureaucratic confusion, so he quietly had them reconnected, paying for them out of his own pocket to avoid a fuss. The more alarming discoveries were in the kitchen. He'd open the fridge and find yogurt containers furred with green mold, leftovers fossilizing on the shelves. When he asked, Grandma would just say getting groceries was hard. That's when he found out her old pickup truck, the one she'd confidently driven up until her 90th birthday, had been sold. Karen had told her it was for her own safety, that the insurance was too high, but no replacement was arranged, no regular grocery delivery service set up. My grandma, a fiercely independent woman, was now a prisoner in her own home, living on whatever could be delivered by a kindly neighbor or what Karen bothered to bring. Her world had shrunk to crossword puzzles and the view from her living room window. The craziest part, the part that made my dad's blood run cold, was the proximity. Karen lived just 2 miles down the same rural road. Yet, when pressed, Grandma confessed she saw her daughter once a week on Saturdays for maybe an hour if she was lucky. As it does, age finally caught up with her. My grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep, in her own bed, in the house she loved. She got her wish. But the moment she was gone, the careful facade of family duty crumbled, and things got real interesting real fast. The probate lawyer gathered her children, my dad, Aunt Karen, Uncle Fred, and another mostly estranged aunt named Becky around a polished mahogany table. The air was thick with a fake, somber formality. Karen, who'd positioned herself as the de facto executor of daily affairs, spoke first. She suggested they keep things simple for the family's sake. No need to dredge up paperwork, no need for audits, just sell the house. She casually threw out a figure of around $400,000, split the remaining bank balance, also roughly $400,000, and everyone walks away with a clean $200,000. A nice inheritance, she said, her voice smooth. Mom would have wanted it to be easy on us. My dad felt a knot of suspicion tighten in his gut. He knew the local market. The house, a solid, spacious home on a large lot, was easily worth $600,000. He cleared his throat. "I think we should slow down," he said. "We should understand everything before we sign. The house value seems low." Karen exploded. It was instantaneous, like he'd touched a live wire. Her face flushed crimson. "After everything I've done," she shouted, slapping her hand on the table, "the care I gave, the hours I spent, and you want to drag this out? You're greedy, Willie. Just a greedy, suspicious bee-turd," she cursed at him, calling him every name in the book. Her anger so volcanic and disproportionate it sucked the air out of the room. My dad, stunned into silence, eventually just stood up and left. The deal wasn't signed that day. It took 6 months of tense letters and strained phone calls before they were all back at that table. The legal gears, however, had been turning. When you're a trustee and the beneficiary dies, everything freezes under heavy scrutiny until all parties sign off. Karen no longer had easy access to the accounts. At this second meeting, my dad went in with a plan. He'd gotten his brother Fred, who'd been quiet and distant in Arizona, to agree on one thing: they needed a full forensic audit of every trust account going back 5 years. When my dad made the demand formally, Karen's mask of anger slipped into something closer to panic. "A forensic audit?" she scoffed, but her voice was too high. "That'll cost $5,000. It's a waste of money. What difference does it make now? Mom's gone, the money's there." But with 2 of the 4 beneficiaries demanding it, the lawyer had no choice. The audit was ordered. The report arrived 3 months later, a thick binder of cold, hard numbers. My dad started going through it, and his initial suspicion turned to simmering rage. The entries were full of holes, glaring inconsistencies that shouted of theft. He brought the binder to me one Saturday afternoon. "You're good with numbers," he said, his voice weary. "Take a look. Tell me I'm not crazy." I spent the night buried in that binder, a pot of coffee growing cold beside me. It wasn't just suspicious, it was a brazen, itemized ledger of exploitation. Here's some of the crazy stuff I found and highlighted for my dad. Costco monthly food charges averaging $1,500, sometimes spiking to $2,000 for a 90-pound woman who mostly ate toast and soup. The receipts, where available, showed bulk purchases of steaks, liquor, and giant packs of toilet paper that never made it to her house. Monthly payments for 6 different cell phone lines on a family plan. My grandma had a rotary dial landline she refused to give up. Consistent gasoline charges of $400 a month for a truck that had been sold 4 years prior. The charges didn't stop until the month she died. House repairs billed to the trust paid to Summit Construction, a company owned by Karen's husband. A new roof for $16,000. Neighbors confirmed it was just a patch job. New garage doors for $5,000. A home security system installation for $3,500. There were no cameras or keypads anywhere on the property. 2 lavish, all-expenses-paid trips to Europe listed as medical concierge services for my grandmother. Her passport hadn't been renewed in 15 years. Regular monthly stipends, $2,000 to the estranged aunt, Becky, and $2,500 to Becky's deadbeat son for caretaking services. Neither had set foot in the state in a decade. The trust stipulated that all grandkids were to receive a lump sum of $10,000 upon turning 30, marking the end of the yearly $50 birthday checks. The audit showed payouts to Karen's kids and Becky's kids on their respective birthdays. Me and my siblings? Nothing. Our birthdays hadn't come up yet, and the money was gone. Most damning were a series of loans from the trust to Karen's husband's construction business, totaling just over $200,000, issued in return for equity. This was right during the housing bust. The business declared bankruptcy between my grandma's death and the 3rd probate meeting, wiping that equity off the map. And lastly, a schedule of asset liquidations, selling off jewelry, silverware, and antique furniture for cash. Many of the big-ticket items I remembered from her house were simply gone. Armed with this ammunition, the next probate meeting was a thing of brutal, quiet drama. Karen arrived looking deflated. The probate lawyer, now fully aware of the scale of the fraud, laid it out in cold legal terms. This was a severe breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of funds, and likely criminal fraud. Prison time was a very real possibility. The negotiations that followed were short. Karen, to avoid criminal prosecution, agreed to forfeit any claim to the remaining estate. The estranged Aunt Becky was allowed to keep $25,000, essentially an advance on what she'd already been paid under the table. My father and Uncle Fred split the remainder after making the grandkids whole. The house sold to the first serious buyer for $520,000. That was the regular revenge, seeing the treacherous B who'd let our grandmother eat moldy food while funding her vacations get legally outmaneuvered and cut off without a dime. Karen probably thought her punishment was over. She'd lost her inheritance, her reputation in the family was ashes, and she had to face her brother's silent disgust. But she'd also tried to personally rip me off for my $10,000. I took that personally. I don't care how tough you think you are, the IRS is the scariest entity you can invite into your life. Nobody wants their money forcibly removed. I did some research and found Form 3949A, the Information Referral for Suspected Tax Fraud. I had the full audit report and knew the probate lawyer's office would provide the full trust documents if formally requested by the authorities. I meticulously photocopied everything. The audit highlights, the bank statement showing personal expenditures, the invoices from her husband's company, the records of the loans. I had the packet notarized, a satisfyingly official thump of a stamp, and sent it off to the IRS Fraud Division. Then I waited. For 18 months, I heard nothing. I figured it had vanished into a bureaucratic black hole. Then a letter arrived summoning me to an appointment at the IRS building in my city. The agent I met was a serious, methodical man in a slightly rumpled suit. He spread copies of my documents on the table, now annotated with official IRS codes. He went over every detail, confirming timelines and relationships. Then he asked for a sworn statement, which I gave. As I was leaving, he offered, in a dry, understated tone, "You should know our investigation found significant unreported income, well over $1 million." The final reckoning came later. It turned out Karen and her husband hadn't declared approximately $1.2 million in income over those 5 years, the stolen money from the trust, the inflated business payments, all of it. With back taxes, penalties, and interest, they owed the federal government around $420,000. There was no way to pay that on a teacher's pension and the ashes of a bankrupt construction business. Their house was seized and sold. Their cars were gone. I heard through the withered family grapevine that they packed what little they had left and fled to a bleak, dusty town in the southwest desert, living in a rental that matched their prospects. About 3 months after my IRS appointment, I received a check for just over $60,000. The IRS Whistleblower Award, a percentage of the taxes they recovered thanks to my information. I deposited it, the feeling a mix of vindication and grim satisfaction. She should have just paid that $10,000. In the end, her greed cost her everything, her family, her home, her savings, and her peace. Every April, for the rest of her life, she'll remember the price of stealing from a frail old woman doing crossword puzzles alone in the dark. This is a rare story where the punishment actually fits the crime. Losing her inheritance wasn't enough. That would have just been losing stolen money. The real accountability came when the theft followed her into every system she thought she could outsmart. And our next story. He called code enforcement over everything. Now he calls contractors. We used to live in a newly upscale hillside community, the kind of place where old, cheaply built houses suddenly skyrocketed in value. A lot of longtime residents handled that well, but others, they became territorial dragons sitting on inflated property values. Our downslope neighbor was one of them. The moment we moved in, he treated our home like a personal landscaping failure he had to supervise. "Get that walkway resurfaced," he'd bark from across the fence. "Those cracks will erode and dump dirt onto my driveway. And put in a real concrete path, not those cheap paving stones." I tried patience, I tried politeness. None of it mattered. His commentary never stopped. We had too many plants, or not enough appropriate ones. The ones we had were apparently invasive or poisonous or both. Too much mulch, too much new paint, too much maintenance, too many repairs, yet never about his property, always ours. He wanted us to dump chemicals, pour concrete, and sterilize our yard the way he did his. Between our homes was a simple layout, our paving stone walkway on dirt, a 2-foot wood retaining wall, and then his poured walkway. The difference between our yards was night and day. We had actual landscaping, he had scorched earth. His yard was mowed bald, oversprayed with herbicides, and left unplanted for so long that the soil was collapsing into visible erosion channels. He was literally carving rivers into his own property, then insisting our plants would be the cause of any future erosion. As the years passed, he escalated. He started threatening to call the authorities. He reported us twice in 1 month to code enforcement for wasting water until they refused to respond anymore. Whenever we applied for a permit, even small repairs, he called the city daily trying to get us denied. He even lied to inspectors about us having an unpermitted pool. The inspectors came, sighed, toured our perfectly normal backyard, and left. Every time he saw us outside, he yelled something new. It got so absurd that I had to sneak into my own garden like a fugitive tending illicit tomatoes. So when the housing market surged again, we sold. And we sold fast. Rainy season was approaching, and 2 days before moving out, I decided it was time to leave him 2 farewell gifts. Improvements, really. The first was simple: dried blackberries mixed with bird seed scattered generously across his barren yard. Birds adore berries, and once eaten, the seeds get delivered back in nutrient-rich guano, perfectly planted and primed to grow. Blackberries thrive in hostile soil, and his property was about to become a hostile blackberry paradise. Our much-mulched yard wouldn't sprout any, but his, within months, he had a sprawling bramble patch. The canes on wild blackberry can grow thicker than a thumb, thorns like hypodermics, and underground crowns the size of grapefruits. A nightmare of his own making, with a little help. The second gift was running bamboo. I planted it on our side in controlled spots with proper barriers, places where it would thicken and create beautiful natural privacy for the new owners. Our yard could handle it. His yard could not. And bamboo does what bamboo does. It hunted cracks, followed moisture, tunneled under fences, and emerged 7 feet into his territory like nature's slow, silent wrecking ball. It buckled his walkways, split slabs, destroyed the sterile ground he spent years overspraying, and based on the reports we later heard from neighbors, his foundation, poorly built decades ago, did not fare well. He apparently found bamboo shoots growing inside his basement for years afterward, all from the man who screamed at us about erosion. We moved out just as rainy season hit. Our home sold easily. The new owners love the added privacy and greenery. As for our old neighbor, well, he finally got the landscaping makeover he always insisted we should be doing. I'm just glad I got the chance to help him with his erosion problem. By the time he escalated to false reports and daily interference, it was clear you weren't dealing with someone acting in good faith. Leaving was the right call, and the natural consequences on his property speak for themselves. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.